The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Central Park as Thomas Chen hurried along the path, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the pavement. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from his assistant about the board meeting he was already 15 minutes late for. As the head of TechVision, one of the world's leading technology companies, Thomas had built his fortune from nothing but raw talent and determination. Time was money, and he had plenty of the latter but never enough of the former. He was about to call for his driver when a sound stopped him in his tracks, a child's laughter, bright and musical. Something about it tugged at his heart, a painful reminder of what he had lost. Against his better judgment, Thomas turned toward the sound. Sitting on a weathered park bench was a woman in tattered clothes, her face weathered beyond her years. Beside her was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with copper-colored hair that caught the sunlight despite being tangled and unwashed. The child was drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick, giggling as the woman added details to their makeshift artwork. Thomas froze, his breath caught in his throat. The little girl looked up, and he saw her face clearly, those familiar hazel eyes, the tiny dimple on her right cheek when she smiled, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear with her small fingers. Lily, he whispered, though that wasn't her name. The name of his daughter had been Hannah, and she had vanished 3 years ago during the chaos of his bitter divorce from his ex-wife, May. The woman noticed him staring and immediately tensed. She gathered their few belongings, a worn backpack and a tattered blanket, and whispered something to the little girl. The child glanced at Thomas with a mixture of curiosity and fear before the woman took her hand and quickly led her away. "Wait!" Thomas called out, but they disappeared into the crowd of joggers and tourists. His phone rang again, his assistant probably wondering where he was, but Thomas couldn't move. After 3 years of dead ends and false hopes, after the police had all but closed the case, after he had nearly given up, here was his daughter, alive and well, but living on the streets with a homeless woman. He'd finally answered his phone. "Cancel everything," he said, his voice shaking. "Cancel all my meetings for the rest of the day. Something's come up." Back in his penthouse office, Thomas paced the floor, his mind racing. His assistant, Jin, watched him with growing concern. "Are you absolutely sure it was Hannah?" Jin asked gently. She had been with Thomas through the darkest days after Hannah's disappearance, had seen the toll it took as he drove himself into his work to escape the pain. "It was her, Jin." "I'd know my own daughter anywhere," Thomas insisted, running his hands through his salt and pepper hair. Her hair was longer and she's taller now, but those eyes, they're exactly the same. She even has that same birthmark on her wrist, shaped like a tiny crescent moon. Jin sighed. "Thomas, you've thought you've seen her before. Remember that girl in the shopping mall last year? And the one at the airport before that?" Thomas shook his head. "This is different. I was close enough to see her clearly. It's Hannah, I know it in my bones." He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Chen here. I need your best team." "No, this can't wait until morning." He grabbed a notepad and began writing frantically. "I want every security camera in Central Park checked. Find out if there are any homeless shelters in the area where a woman and a young girl might go. Check hospital records for the last 3 years for any Jane does matching the woman's description." Jin placed a gentle hand on his arm. "What if you're wrong? What if you're setting yourself up for another heartbreak?" Thomas looked at her, determination hardening his features. "And what if I'm right? What if my daughter has been living on the streets all this time while I've been sitting in board meetings and making billions? I failed her once. I won't fail her again." As night fell over the city, Thomas stood by the window of his luxurious apartment, looking out at the lights below. Somewhere out there, a little girl was sleeping rough tonight, and if there was any chance at all that she was Hannah, he would move heaven and earth to bring her home. "I'll find you," he whispered to the darkness. "Whatever it takes, I'll find you." Thomas barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the little girl's face, his Hannah, dirty and wearing tattered clothes instead of the pretty dresses she once had. By dawn, he was already on the phone with Chen Securities, the private investigation firm he had on retainer. "I don't care how many people you need to put on this," he told the head investigator, a retired police detective named Liu. "Money is not an issue. Find them." Jin arrived at his penthouse at 7, carrying breakfast that Thomas wouldn't touch. She found him surrounded by old photographs of Hannah spread across his living room floor. "You haven't done this in a long time," she said softly, setting down the coffee. Thomas picked up a photo of Hannah on her 3rd birthday, blowing out candles on a princess cake. "I was always too busy for her, Jin. Always another meeting, another deal to close." His voice cracked. May was right about that much. "And then, after the divorce, when I finally had my weekends with Hannah, I spent half the time on my phone." Jin sat beside him. "You were building something for her future." "What good is a future if she's living on the streets?" Thomas stood up abruptly. "The board meeting." "I rescheduled for next week," Jin said. "I told them you had a family emergency." Thomas nodded gratefully and turned as his phone rang. It was Liu. "We've identified 5 shelters within a 3-mile radius of where you saw them," the investigator reported. "My team is checking them all. We're also reviewing security footage from the park entrances." Throughout the day, Thomas' company practically ran itself while he focused entirely on the search. By afternoon, his normally tidy office was covered with maps of the park, pictures of Hannah, and lists of homeless shelters and soup kitchens. The board members started calling, concerned about his sudden absence. Thomas had never missed an important meeting before, not even when he had pneumonia last winter. His biggest investor, Wang, even showed up unannounced. "The Chen I know doesn't cancel meetings for family emergencies," Wang said skeptically, making air quotes. "Your family has only been your company for the past 3 years." Thomas looked up from the map he was studying. "Things change." "Is this about your daughter again?" Wang asked, his voice softening slightly. "Thomas, it's been 3 years." The police said. "I saw her yesterday," Thomas interrupted. "In the park, with a homeless woman." Wang's expression shifted from concern to pity. "Thomas, we've been here before. Remember when you thought you saw her at that school in Brooklyn, or on that family's vacation video?" "This was different," Thomas insisted. "I was close enough to see her birthmark." Wang sighed and placed a hand on Thomas' shoulder. "I know how much you want to find her, but Tech Vision is about to launch its biggest product in company history. We need you focused." Thomas shrugged off his hand. "If you were in my shoes, would you be thinking about product launches?" Before Wang could answer, Liu called again. Thomas put him on speaker. "We've got something," Liu said. "A shelter volunteer recognized your description of the woman and child. They stayed at the Good Hope shelter on 43rd Street 2 nights ago. They went there last night, but the volunteer said they come and go." Thomas was already grabbing his coat. "I'm going there now." "Mr. Chen, I'd advise against that," Liu cautioned. "If it is your daughter, rushing in might scare them off again. Let my team handle the surveillance." But Thomas wasn't listening. "Text me the address." Jin watched him with worried eyes as he headed for the door. "Thomas, what exactly is your plan here? You can't just grab a child from a homeless woman, even if you think she's yours. There are legal processes." Thomas paused, his hand on the doorknob. "I just need to see her up close, talk to this woman, find out what happened." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I need to know why my daughter has been living on the streets when I've been looking for her for 3 years." Jin nodded, understanding the pain in his eyes. "I'll clear your schedule for the rest of the week. But Thomas," she added as he opened the door, "be careful. If this really is Hannah, and this woman has been taking care of her all this time, she might have a good reason for what she's done." Thomas hadn't considered that possibility, and it stopped him cold. What if the woman wasn't a kidnapper but a rescuer? What might that say about what really happened the day Hannah disappeared? With more questions than answers, Thomas headed for Good Hope Shelter, determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The Good Hope Shelter was nothing like Thomas had imagined. Instead of a dark, depressing place, it was clean and bright, with colorful children's drawings taped to the walls. Still, there was no escaping the reality that its residents had nowhere else to go. Thomas felt out of place in his expensive suit as he approached the front desk. A tired-looking older woman with kind eyes glanced up at him. "Can I help you?" she asked, clearly wondering what a man like him was doing there. "I'm looking for a woman and a little girl," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice steady. "The girl is about 5 or 6 with copper hair. The woman is older, maybe in her 40s. The woman's expression changed immediately, becoming guarded. "We respect our guests' privacy here, sir." Thomas pulled out his phone and showed her a picture of Hannah from 3 years ago. "This is my daughter. She disappeared when she was 2. I believe she's with this woman you've been helping." The woman studied the photo for a long moment. "Wait here," she finally said, disappearing through a door marked "Staff Only." Thomas paced the small lobby, his heart racing. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, an older man with grey hair and a name tag reading Director emerged. "I'm Paul," he said, extending his hand. "Why don't we talk in my office?" Once they were seated, Paul folded his hands on his desk. "The woman you're looking for calls herself Rose. The little girl is Lally. They've been coming here on and off for about 2 years." Thomas leaned forward. "That's my daughter Hannah. She was taken 3 years ago." Paul's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Chen, we see a lot of complicated situations here. People running from abuse, addiction, bad circumstances." "I'm not an abuser," Thomas interrupted, anger flashing in his eyes. "My daughter disappeared during my divorce. The police thought my ex-wife might have taken her overseas, but they never found any trace of them." "And you're certain this child is yours?" "She has a crescent-shaped birthmark on her wrist. I saw it in the park." Paul nodded slowly. "Rose and Lily are here now. They came in last night. But I need to warn you, Rose is extremely protective of the girl. If you go in making accusations or demands, they'll disappear again." Thomas took a deep breath. "I just want to talk to her, to understand." Paul led him through a hallway to a small cafeteria. There, at a corner table, sat the woman from the park. The little girl, Hannah, he was sure of it, was beside her, coloring on a piece of paper. Thomas froze, overwhelmed by emotion. She looked so much like the photographs, yet different too, older, wilder somehow, but unmistakably his child. Rose noticed him immediately. Her body tensed, and she pulled the girl closer. Thomas approached slowly, fighting every instinct to rush forward and grab his daughter. "Hello," he said softly. Rose's eyes were fierce. "What do you want?" she demanded, though her voice was low to avoid frightening the child. "My name is Thomas Chen. I believe that's my daughter." The little girl looked up at him curiously but showed no sign of recognition. Rose stood abruptly. "We're leaving," she said to the child. "Pack up your colors, Lily." "Please," Thomas begged. "Just talk to me. If I'm wrong, I'll never bother you again." Paul stepped between them. "Rose, maybe you should hear him out. In my office, where Lily can stay with Miss Fran at the front desk." Rose hesitated, looking between Thomas, Paul, and the little girl. "Lily, honey," Paul said gently, "would you like to help Ms. Fran sort the new donated toys? I think there are some stuffed animals that need organizing." The girl looked to Rose for permission. After a moment, Rose nodded stiffly. As the child walked away with Paul, she turned to Thomas with undisguised hostility. "I don't know what game you're playing, but she is not your daughter." Thomas pulled out his phone again and showed her more pictures of Hannah at the beach, in the bathtub where her birthmark was clearly visible, opening presents at Christmas. Rose's face paled slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. "Lots of children have birthmarks. It's a coincidence." "Where did you find her?" Thomas asked directly. Rose crossed her arms. "I didn't find her anywhere. She's my niece." "Then why are you living on the streets? Why haven't you gone to social services for help?" "Not everyone trusts the system," she shot back. "Some of us have learned that the hard way." Thomas didn't back down. "I can prove she's my daughter. A simple DNA test." "Absolutely not," Rose interrupted. "You're not taking her blood or anything else. We're leaving, and if you follow us, I'll call the police." "I already have," came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Liu standing in the doorway, 2 uniformed officers beside him. "Mr. Chen reported his daughter missing 3 years ago. We have a case number, DNA samples on file, and dental records." Rose's face crumpled with fear. "No," she whispered. "You don't understand. You can't take her." As the officers approached, Thomas suddenly realized this wasn't playing out how he'd imagined. The naked terror on Rose's face wasn't that of a kidnapper caught in the act, but of someone desperately trying to protect a child. "Wait," he said to the officers. "Just wait." The next few hours passed in a blur of tension and confusion. Thomas had convinced the officers to hold off on any immediate action, buying time to understand the situation. Now they all sat in Paul's small office. Thomas, Rose, Paul, and Liu, while Lily remained with Miss Fran, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. "Start from the beginning," Thomas said, his voice gentler now. "Please, I just want to understand." Rose stared at her worn shoes for a long moment before speaking. "My real name is Catherine Mills." Her voice was barely above a whisper. 3 years ago, I was a pediatric nurse at City General Hospital." Thomas frowned. "A nurse? Then why?" "Let her finish," Paul said quietly. Catherine took a deep breath. "I'd lost everything after my husband and son died in a car accident. I couldn't function, couldn't work. I started missing shifts. Eventually, I lost my job, then my apartment." Her eyes hardened. "The system doesn't catch you when you fall. It lets you hit bottom." "What about Lily?" Thomas pressed. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I was at the hospital one day, just sitting in the waiting room because it was warm and familiar. This little girl wandered in alone. She was crying, scared to death. No parents in sight." Thomas leaned forward. "Hannah was with her mother that day. My ex-wife, me, had custody." Catherine nodded. "The girl was about 2, maybe a little older. She couldn't tell me her name or where her parents were. She just kept crying. I waited with her, thinking security would come looking or a frantic parent would show up." She paused. No one came. "That's impossible," Thomas said. "May would never." "I took her to the security desk," Catherine continued. "But the girl was so terrified, clinging to me like I was her lifeline. And then I noticed something strange. She seemed drowsy, like she'd been given something. When I pointed this out to the security guard, he didn't seem concerned at all. Just said they'd call social services." Liu, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. "Did you report this to the police?" Catherine laughed bitterly. "With what evidence? A feeling? Besides, I just lost my job. Who would believe me?" She looked directly at Thomas. "I made a choice that day. Right or wrong, I took her and left." The room fell silent as Thomas processed this. "You're saying my daughter was abandoned at a hospital? That's not possible. The police investigated Mai thoroughly." "Did they?" Catherine challenged. "Or did they just assume she'd taken the girl out of the country because that fit their theory?" Thomas turned to Liu. "What do we know about Mai's whereabouts that day?" Liu flipped through his notes. "According to the original investigation, she said she was at home with Hannah all day. No witnesses could confirm this." "Phone records?" Thomas asked. "Her phone pinged near your apartment in the morning, then nothing until evening." Thomas ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "This makes no sense. Why would May abandon our daughter?" Catherine shook her head. "I don't know anything about your ex-wife. I only know what I found, a frightened little girl who needed protection." Paul, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "That's an easy way to confirm if Lily is really Hannah." A DNA test whirled. "And then what?" Catherine interrupted. "You think I don't know what happens next? He's rich and powerful," she gestured at Thomas. "He'll take her away, and I'll never see her again. She won't understand what's happening or why the only person she remembers as her mother is suddenly gone." Thomas was about to protest when a thought struck him. "You said she seemed drugged. Did she have any memories? Did she talk about her parents?" Catherine's expression softened slightly. "For weeks, she had nightmares. Called out for someone named Mama and sometimes Baba. That's all. Eventually, the nightmares stopped. She started calling me May because she couldn't say my full name." Thomas felt a pang in his chest. "Baba, that's what she called me." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. "There's something I don't understand," Liu said finally. "If you were trying to protect her, why live on the streets? Why not find help?" Catherine's face hardened again. "I tried shelters at first, but they asked too many questions. Someone would have taken her away, and I wasn't well after losing my family. Making rational decisions wasn't exactly my strong point." She looked down at her hands. "By the time I was thinking clearly again, we had a life. Different, but still ours." Thomas stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Everything he thought he knew about his daughter's disappearance was unraveling. If Catherine was telling the truth, then where had May been that day? And why would she abandon their daughter at a hospital? "I want to see her," he said finally. "Not to take her, just to talk to her." Catherine hesitated, then gave a small nod. "She's going to be confused. You can't tell her who you are. Not yet." Thomas agreed, his heart pounding at the thought of finally speaking to his long-lost daughter, while his mind raced with new questions about what really happened 3 years ago. Miss Fran led Lily back into the room, the little girl clutching a worn teddy bear that had clearly seen better days. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes darting between the unfamiliar faces until she spotted Catherine. "May," she called out, running to Catherine and climbing onto her lap. Catherine wrapped her arms protectively around the child, kissing the top of her head. "Hey, sweetheart," Catherine said softly. "Did you have fun with Miss Fran?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "We fixed all the toys, and she gave me Mr. Fuzzy." She held up the teddy bear proudly. Thomas couldn't take his eyes off her. Her voice, her mannerisms, the way she scrunched her nose when she smiled, it was all so achingly familiar, yet she had no idea who he was. He was a stranger to his own daughter. "Lily," Catherine said carefully, "this is Mr. Chen. He wanted to meet you." The little girl regarded Thomas with curious eyes. "Hello," she said shyly, partially hiding her face against Catherine's shoulder. "Hello, Lily," Thomas replied, his voice thick with emotion. "That's a very nice bear you have." She nodded, warming up slightly. "His name is Mr. Fuzzy. He was lonely on the shelf." "Well, I'm glad you found each other then," Thomas said, fighting back tears. Paul suggested they all move to the shelter's small playroom where Lily might feel more comfortable. Once there, the little girl quickly became absorbed in a box of building blocks while the adults watched from a short distance away. "She seems happy," Thomas observed quietly. "Healthy." Catherine nodded. "I did the best I could. Always made sure she ate even when I didn't. Found places where she could bathe. Taught her letters and numbers." Thomas watched as Lily carefully stacked the blocks, her little tongue poking out in concentration, exactly as Hannah used to do. "You've taken good care of her," he admitted reluctantly. "What happens now?" Catherine asked, the fear evident in her voice. Before Thomas could answer, Liu approached with his phone. "Mr. Chen, the lab can do a rush DNA test tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a technician to come here." Catherine tensed. "I told you." "We need to know for certain," Thomas interrupted gently. "For everyone's sake." Catherine looked like she might protest further, but then deflated slightly. "And when it shows she's yours?" "What then? You'll take her to your mansion and I'll never see her again." Her voice cracked. "She won't understand. She'll think I abandoned her." Thomas hadn't thought that far ahead. The reality of what reuniting with Hannah would actually mean was only now hitting him. This wasn't as simple as finding a missing object and reclaiming it. This was a child, his child, who had built a life and formed attachments. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "But I know what it's like to lose a child. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone." Their conversation was interrupted when Lily called out, "May, look." She had built a wobbly tower of blocks and was beaming with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetie," Catherine called back. Then, to Thomas, "She's been having nightmares again the past few weeks. Bad ones. Wakes up crying for someone to help her." Thomas frowned. "What kind of nightmares?" "She never remembers much. Just feelings of being scared, someone grabbing her." Catherine hesitated. Once she mentioned a man with a dragon on his arm. Thomas felt a chill run through him. "A dragon tattoo." Catherine nodded. "I think so. Why? Does that mean something to you?" Thomas's mind raced. "After our divorce, May started dating someone new. I only met him once at a custody exchange. He had tattoos. I remember noticing a dragon on his forearm." He turned to Liu. "Did the original investigation look into him?" Liu shook his head. "Not that I recall. If your ex-wife never mentioned him as being present that day." While they were talking, Lily had abandoned her blocks and was now standing directly in front of Thomas, studying him with an intensity that made him hold his breath. "Your eyes look like mine," she said simply. Thomas nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Do you want to play blocks with me?" she asked. "I'd like that very much," Thomas replied. As he sat down on the floor beside his daughter, because he was now certain that's who she was, he caught Catherine watching them with a mix of fear and resignation. In her eyes, he saw the same love for Lily that he felt in his own heart. Across the room, Paul was speaking quietly with a woman Thomas hadn't noticed before. Their conversation seemed serious, and Paul kept glancing in their direction. Something about the woman seemed vaguely familiar, but Thomas couldn't place her. "Excuse me," the woman said, approaching their group. "I'm Dr. Walker from Child Services. I've been called in regarding this situation, and I'm afraid I have some concerning news." The room fell silent as Dr. Walker's words hung in the air. Lily, sensing the sudden tension, moved closer to Catherine, pressing against her side. "What concerning news?" Thomas asked, standing up. Dr. Walker glanced at Lily, then back to the adults. "Perhaps we should speak privately." Paul suggested Lily could help Ms. Fran make some hot chocolate in the kitchen. After the child reluctantly left with the shelter worker, Dr. Walker sat down with them. "We've located Mai Chen," she said. Thomas felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath him. "Where is she?" "She's in the hospital. She was found unconscious in a motel room yesterday, apparent overdose." Dr. Walker's voice was clinical but not unkind. "When they ran her ID, her name flagged in the missing persons database connected to your daughter's case." Thomas struggled to process this. Mai had always been health-conscious, ambitious. Addiction seemed completely out of character. Will she recover? "She's stable, but still hasn't regained consciousness." Dr. Walker hesitated. "There's more. The motel room was registered to a man named Victor Zhao. Does that name mean anything to you?" Thomas shook his head, but Catherine gasped softly. "The dragon tattoo," she whispered. "Could it be the same man?" Lily was already typing on his phone. Victor Zhao, several priors for drug possession, one charge of domestic violence that was dropped when the victim refused to testify. He pulled up a mugshot and showed it to Thomas. "Is this the man you met?" Thomas studied the image, a hard-faced man with cold eyes. "Yes, that's him. This was her boyfriend after our divorce." Dr. Walker frowned. "According to the motel manager, Mr. Zhao has been renting the room for nearly 3 years. Paid cash, kept to himself. Neighbors reported frequent arguments." 3 years. Thomas repeated, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. "She's been there all this time, just across town." Catherine leaned forward. "You think this man, this Victor, was involved in what happened to Lily?" Dr. Walker nodded. "Police found some disturbing items in the motel room. Children's clothing hidden in a suitcase, and a prescription for sedatives in Mai Chen's name, dated 3 years ago." A terrible picture was beginning to form in Thomas's mind. "You think Mai was living with this man when Hannah disappeared? That he might have done something to her?" "It's a theory the police are exploring," Dr. Walker confirmed. "They'd like to interview Lily, but given her age and the circumstances." "No," Catherine said firmly. "She's been through enough." Thomas surprised himself by agreeing. Catherine's right. She's only starting to feel safe again. Dr. Walker studied them both. "The DNA test will proceed tomorrow as planned. However, there's another matter we need to discuss. Given the circumstances, we can't release Lily into either of your custodies immediately." "What?" Catherine and Thomas spoke simultaneously. "Mr. Chen, while you are likely the biological father, you haven't been in the child's life for 3 years. And Ms. Mills, while your intentions may have been good, you effectively took a child without reporting it." Dr. Walker's tone softened slightly. "Child Services needs to ensure Lily's best interests are protected. I'm recommending temporary placement in a foster home while the courts—" "No," Thomas interrupted. "Absolutely not. The thought of Hannah Lily being taken from both of them and placed with strangers was unimaginable. He'd seen what foster care could do to children through his company's charitable foundation." Catherine looked equally horrified. She'd be traumatized all over again. Liu, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "There might be an alternative. If both Mr. Chen and Ms. Mills were to agree to a temporary shared arrangement under supervision, would that satisfy Child Services until the court makes a final determination?" Dr. Walker considered this. It's unusual, but not impossible. Where would the child stay? Before Thomas could suggest his penthouse, Catherine spoke. She needs stability, familiarity. Somewhere she feels safe. Thomas realized she was right. Taking Lily from Catherine and placing her in his luxurious but unfamiliar home would only add to her confusion. Yet the shelter was no place for a child long-term. I have a suggestion, Paul said. The shelter owns a small transitional apartment building for families getting back on their feet. We could make one available for Ms. Mills and Lily, with Mr. Chen having regular supervised visits. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll cover any costs, of course. Dr. Walker still looked hesitant. The court would need assurances. I'll hire the best child psychologist in the city to help with the transition, Thomas added, and security to ensure that this Victor person can't get anywhere near her. And I'd undergo any parenting assessments required, Catherine offered. As they negotiated the details, Thomas caught Catherine watching him with surprise, perhaps seeing him differently for the first time. He realized he was seeing her differently too, not as a kidnapper, but as someone who had protected his daughter when no one else could. In the kitchen, they could hear Lily's laughter as she helped make hot chocolate. The sound bridged the divide between them, a reminder of what truly mattered. We need to find out what really happened 3 years ago, Thomas said quietly. For her sake. Catherine nodded, a silent agreement forming between them just as Liu's phone rang. It's the hospital, he said, answering. His expression changed as he listened. I understand. We'll be right there. He hung up and looked at Thomas. May is awake, and she's asking for you. The hospital room was dimly lit, with only the steady beeping of monitors breaking the silence. May looked nothing like the confident, fashionable woman Thomas remembered. Her face was gaunt, her once glossy hair dull and thin. Dark bruises marked her arms where IV lines entered her veins. Thomas approached her bed cautiously, Liu and Dr. Walker waiting outside. Catherine had stayed behind with Lily, both of them unaware of what might be revealed in this room. May, Thomas said softly. Her eyes fluttered open, taking a moment to focus on him. Thomas. Her voice was barely a whisper. You found her. Thomas felt his chest tighten. Hannah, you know she's alive. Tears spilled down May's hollow cheeks. I didn't know if she made it. He wouldn't tell me. Victor? She nodded weakly. I never meant for any of this to happen. She began to sob, the monitors beeping faster as her distress grew. Is she okay? Please tell me she's okay. She's safe. Thomas assured her, finding it difficult to reconcile the broken woman before him with the anger he'd carried for 3 years. What happened, May? The truth. May turned her face away. I met Victor during our divorce. He seemed so different from you, exciting, dangerous. By the time I saw who he really was, I was trapped. Her voice trembled. He had a temper. Controlled everything, my money, my phone, who I could talk to. The picture was becoming clearer, but Thomas needed more. And Hannah. He hated her. Said she took too much of my attention. May's fingers twisted in the thin hospital blanket. That day, the day she disappeared, he was supposed to be out. I left Hannah watching cartoons for just a few minutes to take a shower. When I came out, he was there. Thomas finished for her. She nodded. They were both gone. When he came back alone, he said he'd taken care of the problem. I thought. She broke down again, unable to continue. You thought he killed her, Thomas said, horrified. He threatened to do the same to me if I ever told anyone. Said he buried her where no one would find her. May's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of shame and desperation. I was a coward. I believed him. Why didn't you run? Get help? He kept me drugged most of the time. When the police questioned me, I was terrified he was watching. After they stopped looking, there seemed no point in risking my life for a child I thought was already gone. Thomas struggled to process her words. The woman he'd once loved had lived in terror for 3 years, believing their daughter was dead, while Hannah had been alive and safe with Catherine all along. She's been living on the streets, Thomas said, not hiding the accusation in his voice. With a homeless woman who found her abandoned at a hospital. Mee's eyes widened. A hospital? He must have left her there, thinking no one would connect her to us. Fresh tears flowed. I don't deserve forgiveness, Thomas, but please, let me see her just once. Thomas stood up. That's not my decision to make. She doesn't remember you. Doesn't remember either of us. She goes by Lily now. May closed her eyes in pain. Do what's best for her. That's all I ask. Outside in the hallway, Thomas relayed everything to Liu and Dr. Walker. The police will want her statement, Liu said, and they're still looking for Victor Zhao. Thomas nodded. She'll cooperate. But first, we need to focus on Hannah, on Lily. Over the next few weeks, life took on a strange new rhythm. The DNA test confirmed what they already knew. Lily was indeed Hannah Chen. Thomas rented a modest but comfortable apartment near the shelter for Catherine and Lily with round-the-clock security. Every day he would visit, slowly building a relationship with his daughter through games, stories, and shared meals. Catherine watched this careful dance with mixed emotions. The DNA test had confirmed her greatest fear, yet Thomas had surprised her by insisting she remain a central part of Lily's life. She loves you, he had said simply. I won't take that away from her. The child psychologist who worked with them suggested that sudden changes would only traumatize Lily further. Instead, they created a gentle transition plan, introducing the truth in small, age-appropriate pieces. So you're my real dad? Lily asked one afternoon as they built a block tower together. Yes, Thomas replied, his heart pounding. Is that okay? Lily considered this seriously, in the way only children can. Does that mean I have to stop living with May? No, sweetheart. May will always be part of your life. The little girl nodded, seemingly satisfied, and returned to her blocks. The adults exchanged glances over her head, marveling at her resilience. 1 month after their first meeting in Central Park, Victor Zhao was arrested trying to cross the Canadian border. With May's testimony and evidence from the motel room, he faced multiple charges, ensuring he would never threaten their unusual family again. As autumn turned to winter, Thomas made a decision. His company had survived without his constant presence. Perhaps his daughter could thrive with his full attention. He stepped back from day-to-day operations, focusing instead on what truly mattered. On a snowy December morning, Thomas, Catherine, and Lily stood in the newly established Hannah Chen Foundation, dedicated to helping homeless families and children in crisis. Why does it have my name? Lily asked, still not fully comfortable with her birth name. Thomas knelt beside her. Because your story is going to help a lot of people find their way home, just like you did. Catherine squeezed the little girl's hand. And home isn't always what we expect it to be. As they walked through the building together, not quite a traditional family, but bound by love for one small girl, Thomas reflected on how finding his daughter had changed everything. Sometimes the greatest treasures came in unexpected packages, and sometimes the most unlikely people became the greatest blessings of all.